You're grappling with the ghost of a past decision, a mistake that whispers self-doubt or perhaps shouts regret, filling your mind with what-ifs. This isn't just mental noise, it's a profound physiological and psychological event. Your brain's amygdala, the ancient sentinel of your nervous system, is likely overactive. It cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger in the wild and the memory of a professional blunder or a personal betrayal. To the amygdala, a perceived threat is a threat, and it signals an emergency, flooding your system with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This biological cascade keeps you trapped in a debilitating loop of rumination where you relive the mistake over and over again. Your heart rate might increase, your muscles may tense, and your focus narrows to the perceived failure, making it impossible to see a way forward. The crushing weight of regret can feel inescapable, a heavy cloak you cannot shrug off. It colors your perception of the present and poisons your outlook on the future, convincing you that you are defined by your worst moments. This state of being is exhausting, depleting your cognitive and emotional resources, leaving you feeling fragile and powerless. But it doesn't have to be your permanent state. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled the Roman Empire from the front lines of brutal wars, who endured plague, personal loss, and political conspiracy, understood this internal battle intimately. In the quiet of his campaign tent, he wrote in his private journal, a work we now know as Meditations, a powerful directive for his own soul. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the very essence of Stoic alchemy, the profound, almost magical ability to transform perceived obstacles, even our gravest, most shameful errors, into the very fuel for our growth, wisdom, and resilience. This is not a hollow platitude or a form of toxic positivity that encourages you to simply think happy thoughts. Stoicism is ruthlessly pragmatic. It's not about denying the mistake, ignoring the pain, or pretending the consequences don't exist. It is about fundamentally changing the nature and function of that mistake within your mind. It is the conscious, deliberate practice of taking the lead, the heavy, toxic, burdensome material of your failure, and through the fire of your focused attention and rational mind, transmuting it into gold, strength, character, and unshakable inner peace. To initiate this powerful alchemical process, you must begin with a foundational practice I call the reflective reframe. This is a micro-method designed to shift your brain's activity from its reactive emotional centers to its deliberate analytical ones. It consists of 3 distinct sequential steps. First, you must acknowledge the event without judgment. This is the hardest part. Simply state the fact. This happened. Breathe. Avoid the immediate cascade of self-flagellation. You are observing the memory, not becoming it. This simple act of non-judgmental observation, a core tenet of mindfulness, begins to soothe the overactive amygdala. It signals that you are not currently in danger, allowing the prefrontal cortex, your center for rational thought, to come back online. Second, identify the specific, objective facts of the mistake, meticulously stripping away the emotional narrative you have woven around it. Your mind will tell you a story. I ruined everything. The reflective reframe demands you become a detective of reality. What actually happened? Instead of, I failed that crucial presentation, the objective fact might be, during the presentation, I lost my place, spoke too quickly, and was unable to answer a key question about the data. Notice the difference. The first is a global statement about your identity. The second is a specific set of observable behaviors. This process, central to cognitive behavioral therapy, is called cognitive restructuring. By deconstructing the emotionally charged story into neutral data points, you rob the mistake of its power to define you. It becomes an event, not an identity. Third, and most crucially, you must ask yourself one pivotal question. What specific, actionable wisdom can I extract from this experience that makes me stronger, wiser, or more resilient for the future? This question is the crucible of your alchemy. It forces your brain to stop ruminating on the past and start architecting the future. The answer isn't, I need to be less stupid. The answer is a concrete strategy. I now know that I need to rehearse my presentations out loud at least 3 times. I need to prepare a FAQ document for myself to anticipate difficult questions. I have learned that I rush when I am nervous, so I will practice box breathing before I speak. This deliberate shift from the reactive limbic system to the problem-solving prefrontal cortex is a form of self-directed neuroplasticity. You are actively creating new neural pathways, teaching your brain to associate the memory of the mistake not with shame and fear, but with learning, adaptation, and growth. Your task today is simple but profound. Identify one past mistake that still holds emotional power over you. Take out a piece of paper or open a new document. Write it down. Now apply the 3 steps of the reflective reframe. Acknowledge it, deconstruct it into objective facts, and then extract the actionable wisdom. Do not just think about it, write it down. The physical act of writing engages different parts of your brain, solidifying the new perspective. Observe how the suffocating grip of regret loosens, replaced by a cool, clear sense of purpose. You are not erasing the past, you are honoring it by transforming its impact. You are reducing your baseline anxiety and paving a clearer, more intentional path forward. What new strength, forged in the fire of this old mistake, will you claim as your own today? From that initial, powerful reframe, we now turn our attention from the external event to the internal battlefield. The mistake has been analyzed, its data extracted, its lesson integrated. But what of the lingering echo? The inner critic, that relentless internal voice of shame, judgment, and self-recrimination, often remains, launching attacks long after the event is over. This voice is the saboteur of your peace, the ghost that haunts your confidence. It whispers that the mistake is proof of your inadequacy, that you are fundamentally flawed, and that you will inevitably fail again. Neurologically, this inner critic is a deeply ingrained neural circuit, often formed in childhood and strengthened over years of repetition. When it activates, it can trigger the same cortisol-releasing stress response as the original mistake, creating a secondary layer of suffering that is often more painful than the initial error. How then do we defend the mind against its own worst enemy? How do we build a fortress of tranquility that this internal betrayer cannot breach? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, a former slave who became one of antiquity's most influential teachers, provides the master blueprint. He taught a principle so fundamental it forms the bedrock of Stoicism, the dichotomy of control. Some things are within our power, while others are not, he stated simply. Within our power are our judgments, our intentions, our responses. Outside our power are external events, the opinions of others, and, crucially, the automatic arising of thoughts and feelings. Your inner critic's voice is one such phenomenon. You cannot, through sheer will, prevent the initial thought, "you are a failure," from appearing in your consciousness. It is an automatic, conditioned response. But, and this is the secret to all inner freedom, you have absolute power over your reaction to that thought. You can choose whether or not to believe it. You can choose whether to treat it as a divine proclamation or as meaningless neural static. Your mind, Epictetus taught, is a citadel. External forces and internal chatter can lay siege to it, but they cannot enter unless you lower the gates and invite them in. This ancient wisdom finds a powerful modern counterpart in a CBT tool known as cognitive distancing or diffusion. The goal is not to fight, suppress, or argue with the inner critic, as this often gives it more energy and attention. Instead, the goal is to disidentify from it. to create space between your conscious self, the observer, and the stream of thoughts it produces. You can begin this practice by externalizing the critic. Give it a name, perhaps something slightly ridiculous like General Grumbles or the Shame Goblin. Visualize it as a character separate from you. When the familiar script of self-criticism begins, instead of thinking, "I am a failure," you reframe it as, General Grumbles is on his soapbox again, broadcasting his usual doom and gloom report. This simple linguistic shift is incredibly powerful. It changes the thought from a statement of fact about your identity into an observed event in your mind. It places you in the seat of the calm, curious observer rather than the beleaguered target of the attack. From there, you can engage in a gentle, rational cross-examination, not as an argument, but as a fact-checking exercise. Treat the critic's claims as you would a biased, sensationalist news source. The critic screams, "This one mistake proves you're incompetent." You, the calm Citadel commander, can ask, "Is that statement 100% true? What evidence do I have to the contrary? Can I recall the dozens of times I have acted competently? Is it logically sound to define my entire being by this single data point?" This isn't about self-deception. It's about bringing balanced, rational thought to bear on what is an inherently emotionally driven attack. This practice actively strengthens the prefrontal cortex and its connection to the limbic system, enhancing your capacity for emotional regulation. You are, in a very real sense, rewiring your brain to be less susceptible to the critic's propaganda. You are weakening the old, toxic neural pathways and building new, resilient ones. Each time you successfully distance yourself from the critic and refuse to assent to its judgment, you fortify the walls of your inner citadel. Your task today is to become the commander of your own mind. The next time you notice the voice of self-criticism arising in response to a past mistake, do not fight it. Do not believe it. Practice the 3 steps of cognitive distancing. First, name your inner critic and acknowledge its presence non-judgmentally. Second, listen to its claims as an outside observer, reframing them. "I am having the thought that." Third, gently fact-check its exaggerated, all-or-nothing claims with calm, evidence-based reason. The expected result is a measurable decrease in the frequency, duration, and emotional intensity of these self-critical episodes. You will cultivate an internal environment of self-compassion and unwavering support, becoming your own staunchest ally. You will find that the peace you seek is not found in a world without mistakes, but in a mind that cannot be conquered by them. Now that you can defend your inner citadel against the echoes of past failures, how do you proactively harness the energy of those failures to architect an even better future? Having built your defenses and learned to command the inner citadel, the final and most profound stage of Stoic alchemy awaits. We move from a defensive posture, reframing the past and deflecting self-criticism, to a deeply creative and proactive one. It is not enough to simply survive our mistakes. The ultimate goal is to leverage them so powerfully that we would not trade them for anything. This isn't about merely finding a silver lining. It's about recognizing that the entire cloud, storm and all, was a necessary and even beautiful part of the painting of your life. We don't just want to recover from our stumbles. We want to use the force of the fall to launch ourselves forward with greater momentum and wisdom than we had before. This is where we transcend mere resilience and step into the realm of the anti-fragile, the state of not just withstanding chaos, but thriving because of it. This is the domain of the most challenging and liberating of all Stoic principles. A more Latin phrase meaning a love of one's fate. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, heavily influenced by the Stoics, called this his formula for greatness in a human being. It is the practice of not just accepting or tolerating everything that happens in your life, but actively embracing it, loving it, and seeing it as essential. This includes your most painful mistakes, your deepest regrets, your most humiliating failures. The Stoic philosopher Seneca used the metaphor of a sculptor. The sculptor does not bemoan the raw, imperfect, jagged nature of the block of marble. They see its imperfections not as flaws, but as the very potential from which a masterpiece can be carved. Your mistakes are your block of marble. Without them, you would be a smooth, unformed, characterless stone. Your errors provide the texture, the challenge, and the specific contours that you must work with to sculpt a life of virtue, strength, and meaning. To love your fate is to love the raw material you have been given, mistakes and all, and to greet the duty of carving it with energy and gratitude. To translate this lofty philosophy into a concrete, life-altering practice, we use a tool I call the proactive postmortem. Unlike a corporate postmortem that simply analyzes what went wrong, this is a creative exercise designed to build robust future systems. It transforms the vague lesson learned in Block 1 into a specific, actionable protocol for future behavior. Take out your journal again and focus on the same mistake you have been working with. Create 2 columns, failure point and future protocol. Under failure point, list the specific granular moments where the error occurred. For example, if the mistake was rooted in procrastination, the failure points might be: checked email for an hour instead of starting the difficult task. Told myself I'd do it later without defining when later was. Waited until the last minute, causing a rushed, low-quality outcome. Now, in the future protocol column, you will design an explicit, unbreakable system to make that failure point impossible, or at least highly improbable in the future. This is not about trying harder, it's about designing a better system. For checked email for an hour, the protocol might be: my first 90 minutes of the day are for deep work only, phone is in another room, and email tabs are closed. For told myself I'd do it later, the protocol could be: if a task takes less than 2 minutes, I do it immediately. If it takes longer, it is immediately scheduled into a specific time slot in my calendar. For waited until the last minute, the protocol is: all major projects will be broken down into smaller subtasks, and I will assign a specific completion date for the first subtask within 24 hours of receiving the project. This practice directly engages the brain's executive functions in the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse control. You are literally building a new operating system for yourself, one designed with the specific data from your past failures. By creating and, most importantly, affirming these protocols, you engage the brain's reward system. The dopamine release associated with successfully following your new system reinforces the entire learning loop, making you more likely to respond to future challenges with proactive design instead of reactive fear. Your final task today is to complete this alchemical transformation. Perform the proactive postmortem on your chosen mistake. Be ruthlessly specific in identifying the failure points and brilliantly creative in designing your future protocols. See this not as a chore, but as the work of a master sculptor. You are taking the ugliest gash in the marble and turning it into the most interesting feature of the final statue. This is the culmination of our work, turning painful regret into a clear-eyed reframe, fortifying your mind against the ensuing self-criticism, and finally, using the event as the blueprint to build a stronger, more disciplined, and more intentional version of yourself. You are not just fixing a weakness, you are building a new strength. By truly embracing Safa Afati, you reach a state where you can look back at your worst mistakes and say, with genuine gratitude and without a trace of bitterness, "Thank you, I needed that." You have completed the alchemical process. You have turned lead into gold.